I don't know. It's like the back half of the year almost is just brimming with anniversaries of things I'd rather not celebrate or commemorate. One of the reasons I don't like the just world fallacy is that it's a very simplistic perspective on why things happen to people. I just wanted to kind of highlight this relative. She was someone that went to college, got married, had children, and worked all the way up until she died. And you always think about how when people achieve certain things, it's going to lead to something that's also good. But then you start to kind of watch how stuff unravels and just, you go, really, that's it? You know, because I had always pictured her, after reaching, I don't know, mid 70s, dare I say late 70s, retiring and being able to, sit at home and rest and relax. And instead, she gets this uncurable, I'd say pretty rare illness that ravages her for several years. And she tells no one about it, out of the belief that she doesn't want somebody else to be concerned or worried about her. And, you look at that and you ask yourself, here's a person who they pay their taxes, they're a contributing member of society by any objective sense. They took care of their children, generally friendly to most people that they encounter. And she doesn't get to retire. She doesn't get to, have those years where she can just sit at home and kind of relax and maybe watch TV. She just keeps working and working until the illness becomes too much for her to bear without everyone else finding out about it. And on the subject of her children, I always mention how I feel like if I were the guardian of another human being, whether I'm their birth parent or someone who's like assigned myself the role of taking care of them, I would be able to acknowledge what significant things they may need to be able to, survive, thrive, etc. And she was one of the few people that actually talk the talk and walk the walk. But what's so interesting about her children is how there seems to be almost no sense of reciprocal ability. Like you have this lady hailing from the South, and she comes over to, California to go to school, and this is where she meets her, future husband, and, just where the rest of her life will take place. And she has one kid who never moves out of the house, stays there for the entirety of their life. Then she has this other kid who leaves and then keeps coming back every couple of years. And the game plan of these two children is that they're going to become, wealthy or affluent, not by, getting some degree from some great school or having some amazing job or, any of the other things that people associate with climbing up the economic ladder. Their whole game plan and mission to be successful or to live affluently is to simply wait for their parents to die. That is the only strategy they can think of or muster to be able to, climb up the economic ladder. And it's so disgraceful because, I've always been the kind of person where, I only have 2,000 subs, whatever, but that's something that I achieved on my own. Nobody gave me an endorsement or any kind of assistance. And, when I talk about, and I'm going to do a separate video just on this topic, the way things are, I genuinely, if I were able to have a full-time job, live in some apartment building or some place where it's not like eating up more than half of my, monthly income, I would be content. But I would also, even in trying to, get more money or like climb up as well, I would never feel as though the way for me to do that is to mooch off of someone else, especially someone that they treat like crap, both while they're alive and after their passing. Because when she was buried, there was no tombstone on her grave. And her own son didn't even know where the place that she was buried was. So like he would have to go, and he would never, of course, never, go there. But if he were to want to see his mother's grave, he would have to go to the directory, have them give him the number, and then I guess they'd give him a map to show him where it is. Now, again, when this lady was buried, there was no tombstone on her grave. Years later, there is still no tombstone on her grave. And you say to yourself, because look, even if we're given like a median estimate, we're assuming that these people pay out whatever amount of money in taxes and whatever. You're looking at two individuals that at a minimum have several hundreds of thousands of dollars. And with all that goddamn money, they can't spend, I'm sure what's not even 1% of it, to put a tombstone on their own mother's grave. The same mother who, if it had not been for her and their late father, they would have none of this. They wouldn't have the house that they're living in. They wouldn't have these. I mean, it's like the final screw you, I've always been of the belief that, and people call me like disrespectful, for example. It's sort of a what came first, the chicken or the egg. If you're going to allow someone to basically die, right, not support them at a time where getting a job is very difficult, or if you get one, they don't want to give you any hours, where it's like known to be hard to just be able to take care of yourself by virtue of having a job market that's, trash. If you're going to sit there and watch that person struggle and then die, then yeah, they're not going to respect you, because all you're good for is running your mouth. But what kills me about her situation is that she did everything for those bastards, and that was her reward. Having them basically just mooch off of her for their entire lives, to where one of them doesn't even move out, wouldn't even think of moving out, because their goal is to wait for someone else to die and reap the benefits of inheritance. And I guess what I've been thinking about is how, like, I don't believe I'll ever be a parent, just by virtue of like how many chicks are doing the whole I don't want to have kids crap. But that's one of the few things where, can I honestly say, if she and her husband hadn't have had any children, that the world would have been worse off? Like, what good are these people to where they can't even in any like pretense of a final tribute put a tombstone on their own mother's grave? It's really interesting how her sense of duty to be there for her offspring like did not translate to them at all. You've got the son who hasn't spoken to his own son in 2 years, and it's such a night and day contrast, where like you have this mother who at every turn is there for her son, making sure he has something to eat, place to sleep. Even when he's not living with her anymore, she's still calling him, going over to his place, trying to clean it up for him while sick. But then with regard to his own kid, he couldn't be bothered to be there for him at all. It's interesting, because it's like you say to yourself, is it nature or nurture? Or like if people are in an environment where they're shown what an actual substantive good parent looks like, and then they themselves can't be that, is it that they're rebelling against the normalities or the supposed normalities of a good parent, or are they just, were they always going to end up that way because they're just a irresponsible, self-centered, crappy piece of garbage? You just kind of wonder what leads to such a stark contrast in between, you know, the parent and then their offspring, and if that offspring becomes a parent, how they handle their own kid. It's really fascinating. So I guess I just want to sort of ask the question, you know, you have this person, she goes and works consistently for over 50 years and works all the way up until she dies. And after she dies, she gets a grave with no tombstone, even though her kids have the money to pay for it. And they sit in her house being completely fine with spending up all her cash that they themselves did nothing to acquire on their own. And when you think about, you know, her getting no retirement, her having children who have no desire to make it on their own, and, you know, becoming a widow, I just want to ask, did she get what she deserved?